Some roads don't just carry travelers. They carry secrets, secrets that refuse to stay buried. In the heart of Florida, there's a stretch of road where the laws of nature bend, where cars roll uphill defying gravity, and where a young woman's desperate last journey became an eternal echo that still haunts every driver who passes through. This is Spook Hill, and this is the story they don't want you to know. October 1982. A cold autumn night wrapped Lake Wales in an unusual silence. Sarah Mitchell, 23 years old, bright eyes full of dreams, was driving home after her shift at the local diner. She had her whole life ahead of her. A nursing degree within reach, a boyfriend who was planning to propose, a family that loved her deeply. But Sarah never made it home that night. Her car was found 3 days later on Spook Hill Road, driver's door wide open, engine still running, headlights cutting through the morning fog like ghostly beacons. Her purse sat untouched on the passenger seat. Her keys dangled from the ignition. But Sarah had vanished into thin air. The police searched everywhere. Bloodhounds tracked her scent to the middle of the road, then lost it completely, as if she had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. Detective Robert Hayes led the investigation. A veteran with 30 years on the force, he had seen everything. Murders, kidnappings, runaways. But this case made his blood run cold in ways he couldn't explain. There was something wrong about that scene, he would later confess to reporters. Something that made every instinct in my body scream. It wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't there. No explanation that made sense. Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, became a ghost herself. Every day, she would drive to Spook Hill, park her car at the exact spot where her daughter's vehicle was found, and wait. Wait for a sign. Wait for an answer. Wait for her baby girl to come home. Local residents started avoiding the area after sunset. Strange things began happening. Drivers reported seeing a young woman in a white dress standing on the roadside, thumb raised, asking for a ride. When they stopped, she would vanish before reaching the car door. Others spoke of cold spots that appeared out of nowhere, even on the hottest summer days. Of radios switching stations by themselves, always landing on the same song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Sarah's favorite melody. But the most disturbing reports came from those who claimed to have picked her up. Truck driver Marcus Webb was one of them. August 1983, almost a year after Sarah's disappearance. He was driving through Spook Hill around midnight when he saw her, a young woman in a white waitress uniform, soaked to the bone despite the clear, starlit sky. I couldn't just leave her there, Marcus recalled, his hands trembling as he spoke. She looked so desperate, so cold. I pulled over and she got in. Didn't say much at first, just shivered in the passenger seat. Marcus asked where she needed to go. She gave him an address on Oak Street. They drove in silence, the heater blasting, trying to warm her frozen body. Then, as they approached the hill's summit, she spoke. "I never made it home," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of unspeakable sorrow. "I tried. God knows I tried. But something was waiting for me. Something dark. Something hungry." Marcus glanced at her, concerned. When he looked back at the road for just a second, she was gone. Vanished. The passenger seat was empty but soaking wet, as if she had been sitting there moments before. Shaking, heart pounding against his ribs, Marcus drove straight to the address she had given him. He knocked on the door at 1 a.m, desperate to understand what had happened. Elizabeth Mitchell answered, her face pale, eyes hollow from years of grief and sleepless nights. When Marcus described the girl he had picked up, Elizabeth collapsed against the doorframe, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "That was my daughter," she sobbed. "That was my Sarah, and she's still trying to come home." The sightings continued, year after year, decade after decade. But what the police never revealed, what they kept locked away in classified files, was far more disturbing than any ghost story. Detective Hayes retired in 1995, but the Sarah Mitchell case never left him. It consumed him. Every night, he would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing her voice calling for help through the darkness, On his deathbed in 2003, Hayes made a confession to his daughter that would finally crack the case wide open. "We knew what happened to Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We knew from the very beginning, but we were ordered to bury it, to protect someone powerful, someone untouchable." The truth was horrifying in its simplicity. That October night in 1982, Sarah had indeed been driving home, but she wasn't alone on that road. Thomas Blackwood, son of Lake Wales's wealthiest family, heir to the Blackwood real estate empire, was driving drunk, speeding through Spook Hill at nearly 90 miles per hour. He hit Sarah's car head-on. The impact sent her vehicle spinning. Sarah survived the crash, injured but alive, crawling from the wreckage, desperately trying to flag down help on that deserted road. Thomas Blackwood stopped his car, but not to help, not to call an ambulance, not to save the young woman whose life he had just destroyed. He stopped to hide his crime. Witnesses, local residents who lived near Spook Hill, had heard the crash. They had seen Thomas's distinctive black Mercedes. When police arrived, they found Sarah's abandoned car, but Thomas Blackwood had already made a phone call to his father, a phone call that would seal Sarah's fate forever. Within hours, the Blackwood family attorney arrived. Money changed hands. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses were paid to forget what they had seen. And Sarah was taken somewhere she would never be found. Detective Hayes had been a young officer back then, eager to prove himself, desperate to keep his job to support his own family. When his superiors, all of them deep in the Blackwood family's pockets, ordered him to close the case, to rule it as a simple disappearance, he obeyed. He chose his career over justice, his comfort over truth, and it destroyed him from the inside out. But here's what they didn't count on. They didn't count on a mother's love being stronger than corruption, stronger than money, stronger than death itself. Elizabeth Mitchell never stopped searching, never stopped fighting, even when the police dismissed her, even when the media forgot her daughter's name, even when the whole world moved on. She spent every penny she had hiring private investigators. She plastered Sarah's face on every telephone pole, every storefront window, every church bulletin board. She became a living monument to her daughter's memory. And then, in 2019, something miraculous happened. A construction crew, breaking ground for a new shopping complex on former Blackwood property, made a discovery that would finally bring Sarah home. They found her, buried in a shallow grave, wrapped in a tarp, exactly where Thomas Blackwood had left her 37 years earlier. The forensic evidence was undeniable. Dental records confirmed her identity, and the cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with being struck by a vehicle. Thomas Blackwood, now 62 years old, was arrested. The family's empire crumbled overnight as decades of corruption came to light. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the most beautiful moment, the moment that made grown men weep in that courtroom, came when they finally brought Sarah home to her mother. Elizabeth Mitchell was 89 years old, confined to a wheelchair, her body broken by time but her spirit undefeated. When they placed Sarah's remains in her arms, when they finally gave her the closure she had fought for every single day for 37 years, Elizabeth looked up at the sky and smiled. "Welcome home, baby girl," she whispered. "Mama waited for you. Mama never stopped waiting." Elizabeth Mitchell passed away peacefully 3 weeks later, finally able to rest. She was buried beside her daughter, their headstones side by side, reunited at last. The sightings on Spook Hill stopped after that day. No more hitchhiker in white, no more cold spots, no more mysterious radio stations. Sarah had finally found her way home. But locals say, on quiet October nights, if you drive slowly through Spook Hill, you can still feel something. Not fear, not dread, but warmth, love, a mother and daughter together again, watching over travelers to make sure they all make it home safely. Some mysteries are solved not by brilliant detectives or advanced technology, but by the relentless, unconquerable power of a mother's love. This is Unsolved Echoes, reminding you that even in the darkest places, even after decades of silence, truth has a way of breaking through. And love, true love, never gives up, never stops searching, never stops waiting.